welcome to another fantastic episode of Tickle.life's podcast. Tee-hee. I'm your hostess, Gaia Morrissette, and today I have a fabulous guest who's going to take us on an adventure. So, awesome guest, introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Ailsa Keppie, and I'm also a collaborator on Tickle.life, so supporter of this whole platform. And I'm actually a somatic sex educator and a women's empowerment coach. So I was really excited about having the opportunity to participate in this new podcast endeavor.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on. And this is not the first time we have interacted. So that's sometimes we get a guest where it's like the very first time I've ever met the guest, but I've already played with her before. So there might be some more familiarity. Okay, so the first thing I always ask all of my guests, do you sleep in the nude or do you sleep with pajamas on?
That's a really good question. And if I said both, would that be a good answer? Like I start off with pajamas because I'm always cold when I go to bed. And then like halfway through the night, they come off. And then the rest of the night is nude. So
I'm all about best of both worlds. So it all works out. All right. Are you a panty wearer or a commando?
Definitely wear panties. Don't like the commando feeling.
Excellent. So what story are you going to tell us?
So I am going to reach back into my past experience, and it kind of feels like a past life almost at this point. But I did spend 18 years as a Muslim, and I spent 6 of those years living in Morocco. And during that time, my then husband and I decided to have a co-wife. And so we went through the entire process of that. And I thought the piece that many people kind of are interested in is like, how do you cope with that? And the
okay, well, hold on before we get into that. All right, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so everybody who's listening, okay, so let's talk about what does it mean to be in a Muslim with co-wife? What does that mean? Like, give us some backstory around that. Like,
yeah, so as in the Quran, it's specified that you can have up to 4 wives for each man, and theoretically, my understanding, and I studied Islam during my time as a Muslim, from my understanding, it was because as the end of the world was drawing closer, there would be more women than men in the world, so it was a kind of a supportive necessity for men to have the care of more than one woman. And so so you could have up to 4 wives. It's definitely not as easy as just going out and getting married again. It was a process. It took about a year, even in a Muslim country like Morocco. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah. Okay, so you're in Morocco, you're Muslim, you're married, you're going to so how did that conversation happen about taking a second wife? Like, how did that even, so let's give, for the audience, can we give a background of you became Muslim? So what were you raised as? Where were you raised? Like, give you a little bit of backstory here.
Yeah, I was raised in Canada, and I was mostly raised as a Quaker, which people think of as being really strict. I don't know if it's a really strict religion, but there was a particular spiritual quest, to have this closeness with spirit. So I think I always felt that as a personal, search. And I met my husband at the time in circus performing, and he was wanting to get back to practicing his religion more. He was a born Muslim, and I had this spiritual bent, and I think that I was drawn into Islam because of the many wonderful things that are part of Islam as a religion. So that was kind of how I got into that.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so you're married. How's the conversation? You're hanging out, and who brings up, let's get a second wife? Like, how does that happen? What happens?
Well, I think Yeah, it happens in many different ways. I think in our particular relationship, as many of you know, relationships are difficult. We had 4 children in a row within 5 years, and time with each other was non-existent. And I think that I picked up a book, an Islamic book about polygamy and having other wives, and I read about these 2 cousins that were sharing a husband, and were telling their story. And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool. Like, who wouldn't want another wife around the house, right? To help with all the work that women do, rightly or wrongly. So I think it started by that curiosity and by the feeling that I was struggling to fulfill the set roles of a wife, a mother, a sex partner, a confidant. Like, it was too much. And I think it came from that.
Okay, so you bring it up. How's your husband handle it? What is his thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna say, how do you think most men handle that? They're pretty friggin' happy if someone says, "Hey, would you like to have another wife?" And I think, he was always really happy to see my piety come out, because to him, and looking back, he was narcissistic. He wanted to look good, and he looked good if I was acting the part well, and if I offered him another wife and that had many kids and was dressing in a burqa, which I did, all those things, he looked good. And also, he gets to have what he thought of at the time as the benefits of another wife.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happens?
So I think we actually discussed it a couple of times, and it didn't really progress. It's finding, like, deciding to have another wife and finding a woman that's willing to be the other wife is also a challenge. It's not the ideal picture that women have of, oh yeah, I want to get married, oh, let me join this already established couple and family. So a couple of people we talked to didn't work out, and so we kind of tabled it for a while, until we were living in Morocco, and we lived with his parents, and his mother had a stroke, and that was on top of all the other stuff I was dealing with. And I just was kind of like, can we get a maid? And he was like, well, I can't have a woman in the house that I'm not married to. And again, rightly or wrongly, that was how he framed it. And so, we began again to discuss it. And this younger woman that lived next door, was willing to entertain the possibility. And so we began the process of going through the courts, to create that opportunity.
Okay, so then what happens? So you find the woman, she agrees. Now you talked about going through the courts to make that into a reality. What happens next?
Well, as you can imagine, like, it took about a year, like I said, to actually go through the process, put in the application. You've got to prove that you have the finances to support another wife. You've got to prove that you have a place for her to live. You've got to prove that. And here was the difficult piece for me. I had to go eventually in front of the judge and say, I'm not enough for my husband. He needs another wife.
So how did that feel?
And that, that was still kind of, I'm like, oh, whenever I say that, because it's like, what was I thinking? I think at the time you just get swept up in the whole, this is the process and I'm going to go through the process. I think, having spent a decade working on it, I've actually written a book about the whole process that is going to be published next summer. And having worked through all of that, now looking back, I'm like, yeah, that was not really what I was feeling, and that wasn't how I wanted to phrase that. Mm-hmm. But by that time, like I said, we didn't have the perfect marriage, and in some ways it was like, maybe this will fix it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what goes on next?
Well, she came over, she lived near us. She came over quite often to kind of help.
Did you like her?
You know, here's the weird thing about other like co-wives, at least my experience. Yes, we actually were really good friends on a certain level, but there was always these pieces where it was like you couldn't talk about without feeling like you hated them, right? Like you didn't want to talk about the sex, you didn't want to talk about the intimacy, or where any of that, or who the husband had texted first. I mean, that came up a lot too, right? Who got to buy a new outfit first, who da, da, da. But honestly, on a day-to-day level, she came over, she helped me with the housework, we'd sit and have coffee together, we'd talk about what we were going to cook for dinner that night. you know um my husband, our her potential future husband or fiance, was happier when both of us were there, because none of the personal issues that come up between a couple came up because there was another person in the room. So on a large scale, it kind of made things quite nice and easy.
Hmm. Okay, so it goes forward. What happens? What happens in the wedding? Tell me how this happens. Because this is very fascinating. This is a very fascinating story. I have lots of experience in polyamory, and from the sexual stands of non-monogamy, but this is like a whole other world. So I'm like super curious. I'm like, tell me more. I'm like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's quite different from polyamory because as a woman in this setup of polygamy, at least in the Islamic way, you were meant to keep yourself for your husband only. Um, there was never, because we didn't go there was never any intimate or sexual connection between me and the other wife, which people ask me all the time.
Hmm.
Would there have been if I had been in, knowing what I know now, and in this as a, possibly, yeah, there was a couple times where you're doing things together, and I'm kind of hetero flexible, if you will, so I could see that. But because there was such a constraint around the relationship, it was like, you are the wives and here's the husband, and you get one night and she gets one night, and that's how it works. And so it was never really an equal thing. It was more about, we're sharing a husband,
Hmm.
um, which is quite a different feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, my husband probably didn't realize that he was opening a can of worms, because by having another wife that knew him intimately, now we could communicate about our issues with him. you know and it's like having a girlfriend that's like really knows your boyfriend, right? Like, it's like, oh yeah, and he did that to you too, really? Like, so I think it started to kind of, he could no longer control, his our view of him, because now we could talk to each other. And I think that did start to happen. And moving forward, that was probably the unraveling of our particular polygamous relationship. I did meet another sheikh, actually, from Kuwait, came, and he had 4 wives, and he was a lovely man as far as I knew, and managed them very well. So I think a lot of what the men don't realize is that having more wives is demanding of them to grow as a person.
Way more work.
Yes, way more work, way more work. Yeah,
Okay, so tell me what happens on wedding night. So how
yeah.
does the
So
wedding go? Where, like, what happens when the second marriage happens?
they didn't really have like a wedding per se. We didn't really have a wedding in Islam. Quite a lot. You go in front of the sheikh. You say you both agree to marry each other, and that's kind of the ceremony.
Okay.
But there, it was a thing for for the husband to take the wife on a 3-day. I think for subsequent wives, it was 3-day honeymoon, or 3 nights to spend with them, in a row. Because obviously you can't jump into one night right away. You got to give the new wife a chance to get to know her husband. And so that I hadn't really got wrapped my head around that particular piece in going through all the court process, and just kind of looking at it from, oh yeah, I'm going to have someone help me in the house and do these things. I hadn't really put it together with the, oh yeah, they're gonna go like have a honeymoon for 3 days. I didn't even have a honeymoon when I got married. So that was a bone of contention right there. And in because we were doing that in Morocco, and my husband wanted to have everything look right, he arranged to take her to a hotel for 3 days nearby. And that was kind of, was it really hit home. And you know as I kind of was like went up to the roof and watched them drive off, it was it was quite an interesting feeling of
So what
like,
were the so let's talk about those feelings.
yeah.
Let's get into that stuff. So what were the thoughts? What were the feelings?
Well, honestly, just a great sense of loneliness, having lost something,
Hmm.
and I think really it wasn't really still there anyway, because there'd been, issues in our relationship anyway, but it was like a real right in your face, wow, okay, then I am now, a wife and mother without any of what I thought was going to be my experience of being in a marriage. And so, yeah, it was just a kind of feeling of the whole world kind of shifting under my feet. And a lot of the support that I'd felt a little bit of, having been in, you get married, you think, okay, we're going to help each other and, do this life together, just kind of disappeared, I think.
Okay.
And that was my experience. And yeah, I think just it was hard not to feel jealous, because like I said, we had never done done a honeymoon or things like that. And just because now she was Moroccan and her family expected that, it was something that he would do. And I think it sets up that, yes, there was a lot of petty jealousies going on.
Hmm.
I remember having this huge, like half a day, I was so enraged because I couldn't find a cake pan, and she
Hmm.
had borrowed it and put it in her downstairs apartment. She lived downstairs for me in the end, and locked the door and gone to the market or something. And I was wanting to make a cake, and she had my cake pan. And it was like, this cake pan represented like everything. Like, you have my life, my husband, my everything. And now you have my cake pan too. It's like,
Hmm.
what? So yeah, there were times like that where it just felt overwhelming, kind of um real difficulty, and it was a constant challenge to bring yourself to the, I'm sharing my husband, I'm sharing my life with someone else.
And is it what happens? It's fast. So how long does this go on for? Are you still in it? What? Give us the fast
Hmm.
forward of what goes on. And
Well, in our case, like I said, it was an interesting, I mean, my mother-in-law, so my husband's mother, ended up dying, and my husband ended up going back to England. So interestingly, my co-wife and I ended up living together for another 2 years in Morocco with my kids, and with our husband not even there. So in our case, it was kind of all of a sudden like both of us had lost this thing. And so we bonded in a way over that, and
Mhm.
almost became like we were a couple. Like, I went to work, she stayed home. That was how we arranged the finances and the work. Um, and for 2 years that went on. Um, and we both, I think, really tried in our own ways to kind of wrap our head around, like, where does our husband fit in this? He's kind of set this all up and then disappeared. So in my case, that was a super interesting thing. And more and more resentment and jealousy came up. I was supposed to give her allowance because I was there and I was working. Well, that wasn't part of the plan. She didn't want me to give her money. She wanted her husband to give her money. And she didn't want to have to, she didn't sign up for that. And neither did I. And I think, there was a lot of like, she'd be cleaning my apartment and notice that I had like new underwear, I think, happen one time. She's like, oh, so you get to have, new clothes, and where's mine, and stuff like that. And I think the resentments just started building up. And after a couple of years, I decided to leave Morocco with my kids, probably on the brink of a breakdown, I would say.
Mm.
And I came back to Canada. My parents, I moved in with them with 4 kids for a year to get myself sorted out, and just left. And the other wife, I feel like she felt more betrayed by me than by our husband in a lot of ways, because we actually were the ones that kind of held the family together. And so that breakup was probably worse than anything else, which is not what I would have expected at all. So it led to lots of other things. But she still lives in Morocco. She ended up with a son by our husband. I think they're still married on paper. I don't think they really spend much time together. And I have moved on with my kids and my life here in Canada again, and that's kind of how and I've actually left Islam as well. So that whole period of my life is kind of bookended. And said thank you very much for the experience and moving on. But yeah.
So what's one thing that you wish you had known before you...
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, the kind of work I do now with women is actually to really like feel that integrity, feel your intuitive sense, know who you are and give credence to what you're actually feeling. I think I would have wanted a mentor to just sit me down and go, you're not really in love with this person. You're not really 100% into this. You're just putting yourself aside to keep trying to make something work that isn't working, and you're grasping for something that's not there, and you're not happy, like, so let's focus on that. And I think that would be, in any relationship, polygamous, single, like, you want to really look at, are you abnegating yourself from this relationship and just playing a role because you think somehow that's gonna make life better? I don't think it ever makes life better. I think you need to show up with your authentic self. And I think that's what I wish I'd had more mentorship with, that, rather than oh, a good Muslim woman does this, oh, a good wife does this, oh, a good this mom does this, and trying to fill all those roles.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how can people what are you doing in the world these days? And how can people spend more time with you?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. Like I said, this particular kind of part of my life as a Muslim, I've written a book. It's a memoir about that part. It's coming out next September 2021 from OC Publishing, and I'm really looking forward to that. So my coaching website is...
Hold on, wait. What's the name of the book? So people could find it.
Neil, you're the first one I'm talking to about this. Okay, the name of the book is By the Light of the Crescent Moon.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and it's just about that time as a Muslim and all of the inner yearnings for love, really, that we all go through, I think, as people, as human beings. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I really, if people are interested in this particular story. And then other than that, I have many coaching programs and aspects to my coaching. Pleasureforhealth.com is my website, and you can reach me through there in different ways. I'd love to hear from anyone that watches or has anything to do with tickle.life, because they're such cool people. And
it's true. We're super cool, right?
Yeah, super cool. And I do really resonate with with people from these other cultures, like India and Africa, North Africa, the Arab states, just because of my experience and living in that type of other culture. I feel called to sort of try to mesh that understanding of other cultures and how those other cultures really shape our understanding of relationships.
Big time.
Yeah. So you know, I have a soft spot in my heart for Shakun and Tickle.life for sure.
Beautiful. So thank you for being on the show. Thank you for risking and vulnerability and sharing. You know, it was wonderful. And for anybody who wants to spend more time with me, you can reach me at GaiaMorrissette.com. And don't forget to go spend more time at Tickle.life. All right. Bye-bye. Mwah!